All right. Welcome back to the Liz Wheeler Show. I'm your host, Liz Wheeler. It is good to see you all. Thank you for joining us today. You know, we had a show all prepped for you, all planned out. And then, of course, news broke right before we were about to go on air. The news that the cases against former FBI Director James Comey and against New York Attorney General Letitia James have been thrown out by a judge. Now, if you're anything like me, your first reaction was judicial insurrection. This is another leftist judge illegally using, in this case, her power to try to stymie the Trump administration. And that may be the case. It's a little more in the weeds and a little less cut and dry than that. So we took a few minutes to untangle this so I can try to explain it to you in as clear of a way as possible as we see how the Trump administration is going to respond to this. So let's start at the beginning here. A judge today issued the following ruling. This judge, her name is Judge Cameron Currie. She said on October 9th, 2025, Lindsay Halligan, a former White House aide with no prior prosecutorial experience, appeared before a federal grand jury in the Eastern District of Virginia. Having been appointed interim U.S. attorney by the Attorney General just 2 weeks before, Ms. Halligan secured a 2-count indictment charging New York Attorney General Letitia James with bank fraud and making false statements to a financial institution. Ms. James now moves to dismiss the indictment on the ground that Ms. Halligan, the sole prosecutor who presented the case to the grand jury, was unlawfully appointed in violation of 28 U.S.C. 546 and the Constitution's Appointments Clause. As explained below, the judge writes, I agree with Ms. James that the Attorney General's attempt to install Ms. Halligan as interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia was invalid. And because Ms. Halligan has had no lawful authority to present the indictment, I will grant Ms. James's motion and dismiss the indictment without prejudice. The judge did the same thing for the indictment against James Comey. So this is where it's a little complicated and a little convoluted, I would call it. The argument that's being had between this judge and the Trump administration is, when did the 120-day clock expire? What 100-day clock are you talking about, Liz? Well, according to federal law, when a Senate-confirmed U.S. attorney vacates their position, and this is the Eastern District of Virginia, it's a U.S. attorney, a federal attorney. When a Senate-confirmed U.S. attorney vacates their position, the Attorney General, of course, that's Pam Bondi, may appoint an interim replacement from the date on which the vacancy occurs for a period of 120 days. That's the interim term. The 120-day term begins when the vacancy happens, and the Attorney General then can make that appointment. So the quicker the Attorney General makes that appointment, the longer the interim U.S. attorney has in office. Now, if the vacancy, again, this is kind of complex, but if you just follow along, we've been untangling this for about the last hour right here. And it's going to be a very interesting legal battle in the days and weeks to come. But if the vacancy persists beyond the 120 days and no Senate-confirmed replacement has been appointed in that window, then the appointment power shifts away from the Attorney General, away from the executive branch, and shifts to the U.S. District Court for that district. And the District Court is then allowed to appoint an interim U.S. attorney to serve until a permanent Senate-confirmed appointee takes office. So again, the question at the crux of this dismissal of the indictment of James Comey and Letitia James is, when did the 100-day clock expire? And by the way, we're also going to talk about whether this indictment can be refiled. Can James Comey be indicted again? Can Letitia James be indicted again? What about the statute of limitations? We're going to get to that in a second. But the 120-day clock is crucial here. So the Senate, the U.S. Senate, isn't it always, by the way, Congress's fault? Like, the most useless people on earth are in the United States Congress. If the GOP and Congress had actually done their jobs and confirmed Trump appointees, we wouldn't even have this issue right now. But of course, they're always the problem, because the U.S. Senate has not confirmed any interim appointees from the Trump administration to the Eastern District of Virginia. So going back to January of this year, of course, when President Trump took office, the last U.S. Senate confirmed appointee to the Eastern District of Virginia resigned in January. And immediately, Attorney General Pam Bondi appointed a man by the name of Eric Siebert to serve as interim U.S. attorney. That happened on January 21st, 2025. Siebert was appointed by Bondi to serve a 120-day term. Now, he did, and that term expired in May, 120 days after January, and the district court then appointed him, because the power shifts from the executive branch to the district court then appointed him to continue his term, another 120-day term, and that lasted until Eric Siebert resigned on September 22nd, 2025, and the reason he resigned is because he would not bring indictments against James Comey and Letitia James. He wasn't actually working for the Trump administration here. So when Siebert resigned, President Trump took to Truth Social and he urged the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to appoint someone else to that position. He praised Lindsay Halligan. Lindsay Halligan, of course, has been a Trump lawyer since 2021. And Trump essentially encouraged Pam Bondi to appoint Lindsay Halligan to that position. And that's what happened. Lindsay Halligan was appointed by Pam Bondi on September 20th, 2025. She was sworn in. Halligan was sworn in on September 22nd, 2025. So again, going back to the nitty-gritty of the law here, who's right? Who's wrong? Is this judge overstepping her boundaries? Did the Trump administration make a really serious procedural mistake? According to the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, the Attorney General can appoint the interim U.S. attorney for up to 120 days starting from the vacancy. Now, the argument that the Trump administration is making is that the vacancy started in September when U.S. Attorney Eric Siebert resigned. They're saying, well, he resigned, and so the clock begins then. Attorney General Pam Bondi can appoint a U.S. or an interim U.S. attorney at that time. The judge is not buying that argument from the Trump administration. The judge argues that the timer, the 120-day timer, starts when the last Senate-confirmed U.S. attorney vacated the office. Because Eric Siebert was also an interim U.S. attorney. He was not confirmed by the United States Senate either. So September 22nd, 2025 happens. Eric Siebert resigns. The judge says then that the authority to appoint a U.S. attorney should have gone to the district court. It should be out of the executive branch hands. Small correction. Siebert actually resigned on September 19th, not the 22nd. Then Bondi appointed Halligan on the 20th and was confirmed on the 22nd. So those dates are important. I said the wrong date before. So again, the question here is, when does the 100-day clock reset? Does it reset with each new interim appointee, or does it begin from when the last U.S. Senate confirmed appointee leaves office, which would have been in January? That's the question. Of course, the Trump administration is arguing that the Attorney General operated within her authority and that the clock starts whenever the most recent holder of that office vacated it, which would have been September. And now this U.S. District Court Judge Cameron Currie is arguing that no, it started back in January, so Lindsay Halligan was never a valid appointee by the Attorney General, who didn't have the authority to appoint her. We're going to watch this unfold because it's going to be a vicious legal battle, because it's not just some legalese here. This is James Comey, for goodness sake. This is Letitia James. This is the justice that we Trump voters voted for when we cast our ballots for the Trump-Vance administration. So a couple of things. This can be appealed, and you know the Trump administration will appeal this, and they should. The other interesting question here is, okay, when a judge dismisses a case without prejudice, it means it's not being dismissed on the merits of the case. It's just being dismissed on a procedural issue. Can these people, James Comey and Letitia James, can they be indicted again? Well, the answer to that question is yes, they can, because the indictments were dismissed without prejudice. It had nothing to do with the merits of the case. So yes, this could very easily just be, these charges could be brought against Comey or brought against Letitia James again. The problem here is the statute of limitations. The statute of limitations for indicting James Comey expired on September 30th. After September 30th, then the government had no authority to indict James Comey here. So in one sense, you're like, okay, well, the statute of limitations is over now. So even though this case was dismissed without prejudice, which means that those indictments could be brought again, maybe they can't be brought against James Comey again because the statute of limitations has run out. And if this is the case, I mean, it's just another one of those. Did Pam Bondi really mess this up? However, that may be the case, by the way. Pam Bondi may have messed this up. However, there is a federal law, 18 U.S.C. 3288, that specifically states that when a felony indictment, and I want to read exactly what this says, quote, is dismissed for any reason after the period prescribed by the applicable statute of limitations has expired, a new indictment may be returned in the appropriate jurisdiction within 6 calendar months of the date of the dismissal of the indictment, end quote. So it's possible then, or at least so it appears, that even though the statute of limitations technically ran out on September 30th because this action was taken, this case was filed, or this case was brought against James Comey by Lindsay Halligan, and it was dismissed without prejudice. Well, if a felony indictment is dismissed for any reason, the law says, well, a new indictment may be returned in the appropriate jurisdiction within 6 calendar months. So it seems like the Trump administration definitely has an opportunity to indict James Comey again, despite the fact that it appears at first glance the statute of limitations has run out. It seems that there's a provision in the law that allows you to re-indict James Comey despite that September 30th date. Again, it's kind of confusing. It's kind of convoluted. It's kind of complex. I mean, we all just found out about this, right? We've been diving into this and trying to untangle this for the past hour here behind the scenes. And I got to tell you that it is possible that this is a radical leftist judge, a judicial insurrectionist who is absolutely committed to subverting the Trump administration and trying to illegally herself take away the just authority of the executive branch from Trump because she hates him. That's possible. We've seen that a lot in the past year. But it's also possible that Pam Bondi really messed this up. It's also possible that this was beyond a stupid procedural mistake. Again, the courts are going to litigate this, and I think that the Trump administration has a valid argument about when the vacancy starts or not. But there is in the history of our courts, there have been instances where it seems, it's not perfectly clear, that's why I'm speaking vaguely, it seems that it was the understanding of those who interpret the law that the vacancy begins with the vacancy of the last Senate-confirmed appointee. And if that's the case, then that would have been back in May, and Attorney General Pam Bondi would not have had the authority to appoint Lindsay Halligan after Eric Siebert resigned in September. That's the part we don't know yet. What we do know is a couple of things. If there's any evidence that a federal judge, is acting outside of his or her authority as vested to them by actually Congress, because these particular judges are inferior court judges. They're not Supreme Court justices. Supreme Court justices are mandated by the Constitution, but these district court judges aren't. They're just allowed to exist if the Congress wants them to exist. But these judges, if there's any evidence, and we know with so many of these other judges that there's reams of evidence that they are exceeding their just authority, Congress needs to impeach these judges. Congress needs to impeach these judges. Listen, I spoke at Hillsdale College last week. You guys heard that if you watched my episode from last week. And one of the students was saying, listen, we were promised all these deportations from the Trump administration. And if you look at the rate that the deportations are happening, it's equal to what the Obama administration did. Where are the numbers of these mass deportations? And it, in a sense, would be easy to point the finger at the Trump administration and be like, yeah, what are you doing wrong? But the truth of the matter is the Trump administration is being stymied by this judicial insurrection, by these judges who are exceeding their authority in order to try to stop Trump because they hate him. And there's a remedy for that. I know Congress is completely useless. I know they're a joke. They're not based. They don't represent us. They're corrupt. They're swamp creatures. But do you know how easy the process is to impeach a judge if a judge has done something wrong? Any member of the United States Congress can bring articles of impeachment against any judge. If those articles of impeachment make it out of committee, it takes a simple majority vote in the United States Congress, in the House of Representatives, to then send those articles of impeachment to the Senate for possible conviction. And then just like a presidential impeachment, the Senate by 2/3 votes has to convict that judge. And there's precedent. Congress has done this. They have removed abusive judges from their positions of power when it was called for, as recently as like 2010. This happens in our country. And the United States Congress needs to be more proactive in getting rid of judges that abuse their power. The other thing, the GOP in the Senate, the Republicans in the United States Senate, we have had President Trump in office for almost a year. There is no excuse on the face of the earth for Trump appointees not to be confirmed. Like, what else do you have going on in the Senate that you can't confirm Trump appointees? We are now 25% of the way through President Trump's term. You have wasted a year of time when you could have confirmed Trump's appointees and we could have actually gotten business done. So we'll see, as I said, in the days and weeks to come, as this plays out, we'll see if this was, if all the fingers should be pointing at Attorney General Pam Bondi or if this is a judge committing judicial insurrection. It is unclear to me at this point which of those two things is the case. But what we know for certain today is that Republicans in the Senate are totally delinquent. We never should have been in this position to begin with, because Republicans in the U.S. Senate should confirm every single appointee of President Trump's. And if they don't, why even bother being Republican then? Why don't you just join the left? Okay, a major, very prominent member of Congress, speaking of Congress, resigned over the weekend. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman from Georgia, tendered her resignation, and I think it shocked the entire country. What was behind this? What are we supposed to make of this? We're going to break that down in just a second. But first, I want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors for today's episode, Crowd Health. This time of year, insurance companies are hoping you'll sleepwalk into another cycle of overpriced premiums, network headaches, and endless fine print. It's just gross. It's why my husband and I quit our health insurance 1 year ago and signed our family up for Crowd Health instead. We're not going to pay enormous monthly premiums to have unreachable deductibles, and then if we do have a claim, to have it denied by health insurance companies. It's a fraud. That's why we switched to Crowd Health, and you should too. There is a better way than health insurance. Crowd Health itself is not insurance. I like to call it assurance. It's a community of people who've had enough of the old system and are taking healthcare into their own hands. For under $100 a month, you get access to prescription discounts, lab testing tools, a network of quality doctors, and a team that negotiates medical bills on your behalf. And if something major happens, which it does from time to time in life, well, you pay the first $500 and then the crowd steps in to help with the rest. It's actually what healthcare used to feel like before it got hijacked by bureaucracy and bad policy, before Obamacare. Crowd Health members have already saved over $40 million simply by refusing to overpay. You can too. This open enrollment, take your power back. Join Crowd Health to get started today for $99 for your first 3 months. Go to joincrowdhealth.com and use my promo code Liz. That's joincrowdhealth.com, promo code Liz. Okay, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, representative from the 4th Congressional District of Georgia, kind of abruptly quit Congress. I don't know that anyone was really expecting this, but this is the video announcement that she posted on X. Take a listen.
Hi, everyone. I've always represented the common American man and woman as a member of the House of Representatives, which is why I've always been despised in Washington, D.C., and just never fit in. Americans are used by the political industrial complex of both political parties, election cycle after election cycle, in order to elect whichever side can convince Americans to hate the other side more. And the results are always the same. No matter which way the political pendulum swings, Republican or Democrat, nothing ever gets better for the common American man or woman. The debt goes higher, corporate and global interests remain Washington's sweethearts, American jobs continue to be replaced, whether it's by illegal labor or legal labor by visas or just shipped overseas. Small businesses continue to be swallowed by big corporations. Americans' hard-earned tax dollars always fund foreign wars, foreign aid, and foreign interest, and the spending power of the dollar continues to decline. The average American family can no longer survive on a single breadwinner's income, as both parents have to work in order to simply survive. And today, many in my children's generation feel hopeless for their future and don't think they will ever realize the American dream. And that breaks my heart. I ran for Congress in 2020 and have fought every single day believing that Make America Great Again meant America first. I have one of the most conservative voting records in Congress, defending the First Amendment, Second Amendment, unborn babies, because I believe God creates life at conception, and I love to fight for the little guy. Strong, safe borders, I have fought hard for that. I've fought against COVID tyrannical insanity and mandated mass vaccinations, and I've never voted to fund foreign wars with your hard-earned tax dollars. However, than many common Americans, people possess the real power over Washington, then I'll be here by their side to rebuild it. Until then, I'm going back to the people that I love, to live my life to the fullest as I always have, and I look forward to a new path ahead. I'll be resigning from office, with my last day being January 5th, 2026, and I look forward to seeing many of you again sometime in the future. May God bless you all, and may God bless America.
Okay. Be honest. Were you surprised when you watched this video? Were you surprised when you read Marjorie Taylor Greene's note that she posted on X saying that she was resigning from Congress on January 5th of 2026? Were you surprised? I was surprised. I did not see this coming. This is how Trump reacted to Marjorie Taylor Greene's resignation. This is a video of him. Reporters asked him about MTG's resignation. This is what he said.
Are you willing to forgive Congresswoman Taylor Greene?
Forgive for what? No, I just disagreed with her philosophy. She started backing perhaps the worst Republican congressman in our history, stupid person named Massey. And I said, go your own way. And once I left her, she resigned because she would never have survived a primary. But I think she's a nice person.
Okay, so President Trump said, I think she's a nice person, but we parted ways because she wanted to ally herself with Thomas Massie instead of me. And his tone was professional and fine. Then, though, on True Social, he posted this. He says, Marjorie Trader Brown, because of plummeting poll numbers and not wanting to face a primary challenger with a strong Trump endorsement, where she would have no chance of winning, has decided to call it quits. Her relationship with the worst Republican congressman in decades, Tom Massie of Kentucky, also known as Rand Paul Jr. because he votes against the Republican Party and really good legislation, did not help her. For some reason, primarily that I refused to return her never-ending barrage of phone calls, Marjorie went bad. Nevertheless, I will always appreciate Marjorie and thank her for her service to our country. President DJT. Okay. So I have a couple of thoughts about this. First of all, I don't love when members of Congress resign in the middle of their terms, unless they have a grave reason. Grave reason. I don't love it because when you are elected to Congress, you have essentially given your word to your constituents by nature of them casting their vote for you that you are going to represent them for a term. I mean, a Congress term is 2 years. This is extremely short term. And when people who cast their votes also donate their money, you have a responsibility to follow through on that. I mean, in a sense, especially to the donors, right? Like they paid money, they gave you money in order to help you win so that you could represent them in Congress. And you're kind of delinquent on your part of the bargain if you resign in the middle, again, unless there's a grave reason. I remember when Sean Duffy resigned from Congress, it was either shortly before or shortly after his daughter with Down syndrome was born. And he said, listen, I can't be traveling back and forth all the time to Congress. I need to be here to help take care of my daughter and her special needs. I thought, okay, that's fine. Put your family first. That's completely valid. That's even an honorable thing to do. I don't have a problem with that. But unless there's a very grave reason, it just doesn't sit quite right with me when a member of Congress resigns midterm, especially when the House of Representatives has such a close, every vote is so close. I mean, there's not a big difference between the number of Republicans and the number of Democrats. We can't afford to lose a Republican vote. And I know Marjorie Taylor Greene is not, she is going through something, right? All of a sudden she transitioned from being Trump's most loyal supporter. I mean, I had her on the show 6 months ago and asked her about her relationship with Trump. And she literally told me at that time that there is almost no daylight between Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump on policy issues. So fast forward 6 months and all of a sudden she's essentially in the middle of this feud with Trump. That is strange. And I'm not saying that you have to agree with everything that the Trump administration says or does. The things she said in the video were valid. However, if you recognize that those things are a problem and your donors and voters sent you to Washington, D.C. to fix it, don't you feel a responsibility to follow through on that? Something about resigning in the middle of a term just doesn't sit quite right to me. Even if you feel that you are fighting an uphill battle, even if you are discouraged. Frankly, a lot of us feel blackpilled now and again working in politics and media because, of course, bad things are always going to happen. But that's sort of my initial reaction. I was like, well, why is she resigning? Like, what reason is she getting? Just because she doesn't want to do it anymore? Like, okay, I had fun playing. Now I want to go home. Well, it's not really a game. So that's my first thought. My second thought is it sounds like the polling behind the scenes was very poor for Marjorie Taylor Greene, both for her current seat. She'd be up for re-election next November. And by the way, that's another reason that it's strange that she's resigning, because she could have just said, hey, I'm not going to run for re-election. Like, if I am done serving in Congress, if I feel that I have given my service and I want to move on with my life, I want to go back to the private sector, that's okay. She doesn't have to stay in Congress for 30 years, but her term is literally up next November. You could stay for the remainder of that year, fulfill your obligation, and then leave. But Scott Jennings had a very interesting analysis of the situation on CNN when he was talking about how President Trump had communicated with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Because, of course, when she resigned, when Marjorie Taylor Greene announced this, a lot of people were like, well, she just wants to run for governor. She wants to run for Senate. So she's resigning from the House in order to do that. And Scott Jennings says, no, that's not it at all. In fact, she has less of a chance of winning a Senate seat than she would even of holding on to her seat in the House of Representatives. This was Scott.
Technically true, based on what I've heard and what I know, that he didn't tell her not to run. But what she didn't say was that he sent her a poll privately, discreetly, and it had information in it. And it showed her down 20 points to John Ossoff. And so in politics, when you want to send a message to someone that you like or that has been an ally, you don't embarrass them publicly. You privately send them information and show them what the reality is. And so I think it's true that he didn't tell her not to run, but it's also true that he did her a big favor, which is to show her information that a candidacy statewide in Georgia for her would have been a disaster.
Congresswoman, thank you for...
Which I think is interesting. So maybe this is, again, maybe this is her way of leaving before she's fired, quitting before she's fired. But even that doesn't make perfect sense to me, because why not just wait? Why not just say I'm not running for re-election and serve the rest of your term? I don't know. There have been allegations that she chose the particular date, January 5th, because it's 2 days after her 5 years in Congress, that once you hit 5 years, you're eligible for a congressional pension. And some people are saying, well, this was just a money thing. She wants to collect on her pension, and that she's going to get $174,000 salary every day for the rest of her life. That's not exactly true. It's not exactly true. So the way that it works in the government is once you work for 5 years in the government, this includes members of Congress, yes, you do qualify for an annuity, which is different than a pension. But an annuity is a fraction of your congressional salary. And if you do the math on Marjorie Taylor Greene's, her annual annuity would be about $14,000 a year, not $174,000 a year. And that wouldn't begin until she was 62 years old. So that's not exactly accurate. The other allegation is that Marjorie Taylor Greene served her time in Congress and got really rich when she entered Congress in 2021. She had a net worth of about $700,000, and now her net worth is like, $25 million, $30 million. And there have been allegations that she engaged in insider trading. That may be true. I don't know. I always am very suspicious of members of Congress who go into Congress at, kind of your average American net worth. I mean, I guess 700,000 is a little higher than average, but you know what I mean? Like within the realm of normal, and then come out with $25 million. However, if you do a little digging into that, Marjorie Taylor Greene says that the increase in her wealth is because of the increase in the stake that she now owns in her family's construction business. Her father started a construction company that is now worth between $5 and $25 million. And she had bought a stake in that company back in the early 2000s, but her stake increased in that company in the years that followed. Her father passed away in 2021. And while it wasn't a direct inheritance situation, I don't know if she got a larger stake in that company following his death, even though she and her husband, or her former husband, had purchased that company in the early 2000s. So why did she resign? Why did she resign? I don't know. It doesn't sit quite right with me when people resign. I mean, listen, you can criticize her for how she conducts herself or disagreements that she has with Trump. That's totally valid. But what she said in that video is also true. She was one of the only members of Congress who was pushing back against vaccine mandates, who was staunchly defending January 6th defendants before it was cool. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene, at least at the beginning of her term in Congress, was incredibly based. The first thing that she did that I didn't agree with was when she sided with Kevin McCarthy when Matt Gaetz tried to, or when he successfully ousted McCarthy as Speaker. Marjorie Taylor Greene took his side, and I always wondered, that was always very strange to me, because that was, Gaetz was sort of representative of the based representatives, and McCarthy was the establishment. And it seemed odd to me that someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's so anti-establishment, I mean, she fought against the transgender ideology before it was cool too, and just is unafraid to take on the mainstream media. It seems strange to me that she sided with McCarthy. So I don't know. I don't know what she will do next, but I doubt that she is going to fade into the background. Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, had an incredibly interesting post on X. You guys are probably going to think that this is, I mean, I don't know if I would call it ha-ha funny, but there is some irony to this that we cannot ignore. I'm going to read you that in 1 second, but first I want to give a shout out to our second sponsor today, that is Preborn. When Mary, the Mother of God, said, "Let it be done to me according to your word," she didn't know what her future would look like. She only knew that saying yes to life, yes to God's plan, would come with uncertainty, risk, and sacrifice. And through the simple act of courage, she brought the Savior of the world into being. Well, today, countless mothers face their own version of that moment. They sit in a clinic looking at an ultrasound for the first time, frightened and unsure of what to do next. Their own moment to say yes could slip away, but that's where you can make a difference. Through the generosity of people like you, the Preborn network of clinics provides free ultrasounds, maternity care, diapers, baby clothes, counseling, and so much more. Meeting women with compassion right when they need it the most. This holiday season, don't let another life be lost. Be the hope for hurting mothers and at-risk babies. Just say yes to life today. Did you know when a mother sees her unborn child on that ultrasound screen, she is more likely to choose life, even if she was abortion-minded to begin with? Your donation can make the difference. To donate, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. And when you say that word, understand that it's not just a word that you're speaking, it's a person that you're saving. That's pound 250, keyword baby. Or you can go to preborn.com/Liz. That's preborn.com/Liz. Every gift is tax deductible and it impacts eternity. And I thank you all for the wonderful support that you've been giving to Preborn. I greatly appreciate it. Okay. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and I want to bring this post up on the screen. On November 21st at 9 o'clock in the morning, Benjamin Netanyahu posted a link to an article on his X account. Now, he didn't provide any commentary, no caption, just an article. And the article is titled, "Jeffrey Epstein Claimed to Have Meddled in Israel's Elections." So, of course, I did what everyone else in the world did. I clicked on this article. And it opens up, and I want to read you part of this article. It says, newly released files show Jeffrey Epstein claiming to have been involved in Ehud Barak's 2019 election challenge to Benjamin Netanyahu. It's well past time to ask questions about the billionaire pedophile's links to Israel. When I first read that, I said, oh, whoa, this was posted by Bibi Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, questioning Epstein's ties to Israel. Okay, I guess we're now allowed to ask this question. This is what the article reads. Now you can understand why Trump wakes up in the middle of the night sweating when he hears you and I are friends. End quote. That's one of the sensational, damning Jeffrey Epstein messages that has been roundly quoted since being extracted from the more than 20,000 documents released by the House Oversight Committee last week. A seeming reference to the power Epstein held via the damaging information he had amassed on the rich and influential, the now president included. Yet oddly, what has been universally left out of media coverage of that quote is what it was in reference to. Epstein appeared to be taking credit for former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak's re-entry into Israeli politics in 2019, which aimed to topple current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the second of what would be three Israeli elections in a year. The quote's missing context fits squarely with the unofficial omerta in the mainstream press on discussing Epstein's relationship to Israel, namely the long-standing claims and rumors that the billionaire pedophile had been an asset or otherwise worked for Israeli intelligence. That code of silence has been on the verge of breaking down over the past month, after DropSite published a series of stories based on Barak's hacked emails showing Epstein quietly carrying out work on behalf of the Israeli government. On Sunday, former Donald Trump ally Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene pointed to DropSite's reporting while on CNN to charge that the right question to ask is, was Jeffrey Epstein working for Israel? A charge met with pushback on that network. The Oversight Committee's release sheds further light on Epstein's entanglement with Israel, primarily through the figure of Barak, a long-known associate of Epstein's who's insisted that he only saw the convicted pedophile on occasion and never in the presence of women or girls. The recently released tranche of emails adds to a raft of disclosures in recent years that shows the two men were far closer than Barak publicly let on. Ironically, many of those disclosures come in the wake of Barak's apparently Epstein-backed attempt to reignite his political career. In June of 2019, after spending years attacking Netanyahu's increasingly extreme and corruption-embroiled rule, Barak, a former defense minister and military chief of staff, officially came out of retirement and formed a new party to challenge him. In a chat with former Trump advisor Steve Bannon that month, Epstein implied the move was his doing, as he shared a report from an Israeli outlet about Barak's announcement. "I've been busy," Epstein wrote in a follow-up message. "Wow," Bannon replied. "I'm dealing with Ehud in Israel, making me crazy," Epstein elaborated 12 minutes later. "Ehud, massive. Can we announce I'm his strategic advisor?" Bannon asked. "This will be a long campaign. Elections in September. Lots to talk about," Epstein wrote back. "This is brilliant move," wrote Bannon. "Thanks. Only the first step," Epstein replied before writing the quote that has been so widely spread in the past week, free of its context. "Now you can understand why Trump wakes up in the middle of the night sweating when he hears you and I are friends." "Dangerous," replied Bannon. There are no other details in Epstein's emails about his claimed involvement in Barak's campaign, though he may have been hinting to Bannon that something like it was in the works. A month later, Epstein had, apropos of nothing, sent Bannon a BBC report on Netanyahu's failure to form a coalition government in the wake of Israel's April 2019 election, which had triggered another round of elections to be held in September. "Will Ehud be PM? Prime Minister?" Bannon asked him at the end of June. "Doubtful," replied Epstein. "But 1, he is not to be underestimated. 2, unlikely top job, but depends on coalition. 3, driving me crazy." What helped sink Epstein's dangerous plan to reshape the Israeli political landscape was, fittingly, Epstein himself. Not long after these messages, the billionaire was arrested and charged with sex trafficking minors, and a series of scandalous new revelations about Barak's ties to Epstein soon followed. Netanyahu made them the centerpiece of his political offensive against Barak, going so far as to officially request an investigation of him from the Attorney General, putting the challenger on the defensive and taking the wind out of the sails of Barak's attacks on Netanyahu's own criminal scandals. It's getting more interesting, isn't it? Severely damaged by the revelations, Barak's poorly polling party was forced to form an alliance with several other left-leaning parties to have any hope of winning seats, and he had to essentially take himself out of the running for a cabinet spot to get them over the line. One can only imagine how Epstein's claimed involvement in that very political project would have further dented its standing if Netanyahu had been able to use it. Bannon's claim to being Barak's strategic advisor was likely a joke, but the two had met at least once before via their mutual connection with Epstein. In February 2018 email, Epstein asked Catherine Rumler, former White House counsel to Barack Obama, who had a mysteriously close relationship with a billionaire sex trafficker, whether Bill Clinton would, quote, would like to join you, me, Ehud, and Steve in a meeting they had apparently already arranged. Despite this email already being reported on by outlets like CNBC and the New York Post, each wrongly published the reference to Barak's first name as Chud, therefore obscuring his identity. Upon learning that Epstein had had a hand in Barak's sudden return to politics a year later, Bannon immediately tried to make himself useful to the former prime minister. "My guy is in Israel. Can we connect him to Ehud?" Bannon asked Epstein. "On it," Epstein wrote back. Bannon's guy, he made clear, was Aaron Klein, almost certainly the former Jerusalem bureau chief of Breitbart, who played a key role in Trump's 2016 campaign and, following Trump's victory, became a prominent Jewish voice defending Bannon against credible accusations of anti-Semitism. Whatever came of the idea, it was clearly not meant to be. Following the September 2019 elections, Klein instead became a close advisor and campaign strategist to Netanyahu, a post he still holds today. The office of the Israeli prime minister did not respond for comment. So isn't this interesting? This is posted by Netanyahu. And listen, every time you post an article on X, it doesn't mean that it's an endorsement. However, in this case, I'm not sure how it could be interpreted differently. The conclusion of the article reads this way. Even with the wealth of material that's been released, Epstein's exact relationship to Israel remains unclear, not to mention an answer to the specific question of whether or not he belonged to Israeli intelligence. While the latest disclosures show Epstein had a keen interest in Israel and its politics, they also show he held a similar interest in many countries and regions and had relationships with a variety of power players across the Middle East and around the world. But what they should mean, at minimum, is an end to the widespread taboo of even asking questions about billionaire sex offenders' links to the Israeli state. Epstein brokered security deals for Israel, had a close friendship with one of its former prime ministers and military officials, and apparently even secretly involved himself in the country's elections. If it were any other country, it would not be remotely scandalous to wonder out loud what it could all mean. Is that fascinating, or is that fascinating? I read this and I actually laughed when I read it. I thought, listen, this whole thing that has unfolded this summer, right? Immediately following the assassination of Charlie Kirk, how there was this narrative that there were many people propagating that Charlie Kirk was suddenly changing his mind on supporting Israel. He had always been ardently pro-Israel, and then there were people who said, his mind was changing on Israel. He was going to abandon the pro-Israel cause, et cetera, et cetera. And we did a whole episode breaking down the background of that. So if anybody missed it, you can just go back. You go to Spotify and search The Liz Wheeler Show and search Israel, and you'll find that episode. But I thought to myself, listen, part of the reason that conversation even surfaced after the death of Charlie Kirk was because Charlie Kirk and Megyn Kelly had a conversation just a month prior to Charlie's assassination in which they had discussed this weird reality that a lot of us on the right had experienced over the summer, which is any questions that were asked about Epstein's relationship to Israel. Did Epstein belong to intelligence? Was it U.S. intelligence, French intelligence, Saudi intelligence, UK intelligence, Israeli intelligence? Any such questions like that were met with a barrage of text messages, private text messages from prominent Jewish influencers in our country that were just full of these false allegations. Someone called me a vicious anti-Semite because I explored that question that people were asking. Was Epstein actually tied to Israeli intelligence? And Charlie chafed under that. He said it was to impugn his character, call him an anti-Semite after all the support he'd given to Israel. Megyn Kelly said the same, that I'm not going to be bullied into saying what you want me to say just because you threatened to assassinate my character with these false allegations. I experienced the same thing. I hadn't talked about it publicly until after Charlie's death, and this conversation came up again. But it was a very strange experience, for, all three of us, Megyn Kelly, Charlie Kirk, and I, we've always been pro-Israel. It's a strategic ally. They're important. You can certainly question whether we should be dragged into a forever war that Israel wants us to be dragged into. Israel's a little more neocon than we are. I don't want to be dragged into a forever war. That's fine. You can disagree with the Israeli government on that. You can question whether the U.S. should be sending so much foreign aid to Israel. Do we actually need to be doing that? Maybe not. Those are not anti-Semitic questions in any way, shape, or form. To be a friend of Israel means you think that Israel has a right to exist and a right to defend herself against hideous Islamist terror attacks. And Megyn Kelly, Charlie Kirk, and I have all been so clear in our position on that. And yet, to receive this barrage of false allegations that we were anti-Semitic because we dared to ask this question led me to reading this article that was posted by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and it made me laugh. Because I thought, okay, is this the standard now? Does this mean that Benjamin Netanyahu is also going to get a barrage of text message from these American influencers who falsely accused us of being viciously, virulently anti-Semitic for wondering whether Epstein was working with the Israeli intel community, which it's pretty obvious now, especially now more so than ever, that he was involved in some way, shape, or form Is Benjamin Netanyahu going to get those same kind of text messages? Something tells me he's not. And something also tells me that those of us who were falsely accused over the summer are not going to receive retractions either for those false allegations. And it's just funny. The concluding sentence of this article, I think, nails it. If it were any other country, it would not be remotely scandalous to wonder out loud what it could all mean. I have always said that you can identify whether someone is anti-Semitic versus being anti-Israel by whether they hold Israel to a different standard, and the specific example than any other country. And by the specific example I would always give was Ilhan Omar. When she supported BDS, or she does still, but when she brought a BDS resolution in Congress against Israel, boycott, divest, and sanctions, she essentially wants to suffocate Israel out of existence. I said at the time, you can tell that this is not just, we need to audit our foreign aid, but that she has a anti-Jewish bias because Israel is the Jewish state of Israel. And you can tell because at the time that she introduced the BDS resolution against Israel, Venezuela was falling apart at the hands of the socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro, and Ilhan Omar did not support any sanctions on Venezuela. It was a specifically targeted effort to sanction Israel because Israel is the Jewish state of Israel. And I said you can always tell when anti-Semitism is the motivating factor if Israel is held to a different standard. And it's just funny that some of these, ironic, I guess, not really funny. It's just ironic that some of these folks, the pro-Israel influencers is what I'm going to call them, were trying to hold Israel to a different standard than any other country, but in the opposite way. Until along comes Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, and he says, no, it's okay, you can ask if Epstein had ties to Israeli intel. Again, cannot make this stuff up. I said at the time when we did that episode that it wasn't anti-Semitic and that it was a stupid idea that we couldn't explore that question, and that I mean, obviously, we don't allow ourselves to be coerced because some people hurl ad hominems on us, and it turns out that we were right. So, kudos to you for being right on that. All right. I want to take a moment and speak directly to you on this topic because the truth is Blaze TV doesn't exist without people like you who genuinely care about preserving honest conversation in this country. You've seen what's happening on the right, the gatekeeping, the approved narratives, the pressure for everyone to fall in line, exactly like we were just talking about. That is not who we are at Blaze TV. We're not bound to talking points or beholden to anyone's agenda. We don't have to check our convictions with a corporate sponsor before we speak. We show up with one thing, the freedom to tell the truth as we see it. And that freedom only exists because of you, Blaze TV subscribers. Once a year, we lower the barrier for people who want to be part of this movement, people who refuse to sit on the sidelines. Right now, for Black Friday only, you can get $40 off a Blaze TV annual subscription. If you've been on the fence, let me tell you, this is the moment. Not because of the discount, but because your subscription actually keeps independent voices alive, voices that aren't controlled by big tech, advertisers, or political gatekeepers. You make it possible for us to keep fighting, creating, and telling the truth without compromise. If you believe America is still worth fighting for, this is your moment to join the fight. And if you are already a subscriber, thank you. You make all of this possible. To someone who needs a space free from filtered, approved opinions, this is for you. Thank you so much for watching and continuing to support the movement that we're building together. Go to blazetv.com/Liz. Use the code BlackFriday40 to grab our Black Friday savings while it's still here. That's blazetv.com/Liz, code BlackFriday40. All right, guys, thank you. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.